Hi everybody, Jorge here, and today I want to talk about who benefits from homophobia. So this is the last episode in my series called Critical Awareness about Homophobia, so you can watch the full series on my YouTube channel. And in this series, I share with y'all what I learned in my research on homophobia and heterosexism that I did a few years ago, and that informs a big part of my activism these days. And critical awareness is basically what can inform our ability to affect meaningful and lasting change around any social problem. Critical awareness is basically understanding of where the problem comes from, how it works, what impact it has, and who benefits from it. So it is much more powerful than just mere awareness of the existence of some social problem, because it makes you able to facilitate and lead those tough conversations in a way that brings about real change. And so, in the previous episode, as we looked into the data about the impact of homophobia, the evidence about the numbers and the economic impact, we saw that society as a whole doesn't benefit from it. And straight people, who comprise the majority of society, don't benefit from homophobia either. So then the question becomes, if we know that the majority of people and society as a whole and global economy as a whole don't benefit from the existence and the prevalence of homophobia, then the question becomes, why has it remained in existence for so long? Obviously, there are some people who do benefit from it. Obviously, there are some people who work very carefully to keep hate and ignorance and violence alive. And so, just like with any social issue, we need to understand who these people are. We need to understand how they think, what kind of messaging they enforce, how they impact our culture, because holding beneficiaries accountable is an indispensable step to the effective eradication of any social problem. From poverty to human trafficking to racism to homelessness to homophobia to sexism, you know what? We cannot hold those people accountable for what they are doing and for the damage they're creating unless we know who they are. So, this last part of critical awareness about who benefits from homophobia. It took me years of research and interviewing people and reflection and contextualization to come to this understanding. And a big part of that understanding came from observing political leadership in the US and Russia over the recent years. Another big part of this understanding came from the networking effort that I made for my book, which, as many of you already know, addresses homophobia and heterosexism among four other globally relevant social problems. So, if today I were to give a short answer to this question, who benefits from homophobia, I would put it like that. Just like any kind of social injustice, homophobia benefits very few people who hold positions of power over in society. And before I go into details and explain who these people are and how specifically they benefit from homophobia, I gotta tell you that there's a big surprise here. Because it turns out that it's not only straight people in positions of power over who benefit from homophobia, but it's also gay folks in positions of power over who benefit from homophobia in very observable and measurable ways. So yes, this is why you can call this video "How to Piss Off Everybody." And I know that by sharing these findings from my research and my experience, I'm inviting a shit show in the comments. Because power over as a system, as a culture, it is making its desperate last stand these days. Around the world, across many industries, you can see it very clearly that power over as a model of power, as a system of making society function, it still has so many supporters who stick to it, who are, nostalgic for the times when everybody knew their place, and who today tell people like me to know our place and to stay quiet and to not rock the boat, who are only able to deny, blame, shame, rationalize, trivialize, insult, and dehumanize, instead of having real, honest conversations about what we're collectively experiencing. So I know that what I'm sharing today is gonna spark a lot of controversy, but I'm gonna tell the truth anyway, because lack of critical awareness about homophobia, and particularly lack of understanding of its beneficiaries, is one of the biggest barriers to its eradication. It's the reason why today we're not making nearly as much progress in the field of LGBT equality as we could be making if we operationalized on that information. So let's go in. First, I want to share this kind of very important concept of power over. So, what is power over? The definition of power coming from Martin Luther King is very simple and very accurate at the same time. He says, power is simply the ability to effect change. So that's it. And power over is the system where the ability to effect change, where the ability to influence outcomes lies in the hands of the minority of people. And those people get it not because of their merits, but through randomness. While the majority of people has no ability to effect change and just has to obey. So, historically, power over is how political systems and social systems have worked most of the time. Even if you don't look at politics, you don't look at the distribution of power, politically, but even if you look at social dimensions, for the majority of history, men dominated women. White people dominated people of color. In America, white settlers dominated and oppressed black people that they brought from Africa as slaves, and they also oppressed Native Americans. And there are so many examples in many dimensions of social inequality. And it turns out that even today, we still have a society of power over in many ways. Even in countries that are democracies, and it's especially hard to talk about this in America because, America is it's a culture of meritocracy. It's a culture that holds in high esteem the belief that whatever we get in life, whatever we end up with, is what we have earned, what we have deserved, what we have worked for. So it's really hard to talk about systemic inequality and structural injustice in America. But when it comes to power over, if you look at the majority of the world, if you don't just look at the most economically and politically developed countries like the US or Western Europe, but if you look at the majority of the world, you can see that there is still a very limited number of people who have the ability to effect change. And that ability is still culturally portrayed as a finite resource, even in developed countries, So those people who hold power are, no matter what they say in the public eye, in fact, they are very unwilling to share power. So they make sure that there are only so many seats at the table, that they are among those few privileged people who have the ability to effect change. And the reason why it actually represents a big problem is because power over is ineffective. That's what evidence shows, from social science, from political science, that power over the system where only so many people have power is ineffective. Because by its design, power over is inherently related to things like corruption, abuse, oppression. And it's economically ineffective, Capitalism, it may sound counterintuitive, but it's true that capitalism cannot work to its fullest potential when we have a system of power over in place. Because when we operate in a system of power over, we by definition disempower people who have great ideas, great talent, and great stories to bring to the table. we'll lose productivity, we'll lose value, and ultimately we'll lose money. So, as global economy develops and as progress in science and technology has been made, it becomes increasingly visible, increasingly observable and measurable how remaining systems of power over hurt us and impose a drag on our collective growth. And when that becomes increasingly visible to everybody, then in order to secure those systems in place, people who benefit from them need to go an extra mile. And one of the most effective ways to uphold a system of power over is this. When you have millions of people in fear, uncertainty, and trauma, you have to hand them a picture of someone and say, this is the cause of all your pain and suffering. So you need to give people someone to hate. And that is, as Brene Brown says, that is a very quick way to build a kingdom at the very high cost for people in that kingdom. And in Russia, things have been getting tough politically over the recent years. And over these years, both in our external affairs and our internal affairs, the situation is getting, more and more controversial and more dangerous. And so over these years, through the majority of the media it controls, our government has been very carefully and very artfully telling us who is allegedly the cause of our suffering as a nation and who, therefore, we should hate. And let me tell you, that's a message very easy to feed to a nation like ours, because the majority of people here live in trauma and fear and uncertainty. And the main trauma in Russia is poverty. We have more than 80% of people living below the poverty line. It's not 18, it's 18, the overwhelming majority of society. And so, who we are supposed to hate? Since 2014, we're supposed to hate the Ukraine and its leaders, and by extension, the Ukrainian people. Even though the Ukrainian people are, most closely related to Russian people in terms of ethnicity and genetics and culture, we're supposed to hate the Ukrainian people. We're also supposed to hate the U.S. and its leaders. So before the 2016 election, we were supposed to hate Obama. And we were supposed to love Trump and to adore Trump because Trump was kind of Obama's rival. And so, before the 2016 election in the U.S., our media were blowing smoke up Trump's ass, so carefully, And now, after Trump showed how he actually relates to Russia, now we're supposed to hate Trump also. So, this is the kind of bullshit that our media are telling us. So first Trump is good, and then Trump is bad. We're also supposed to hate gay road. Have you ever heard the term gay road? So gay road is a portmanteau term which consists of gay plus euro. So here's the thing. In order to most effectively instigate hatred against European governments and European leaders and European values, Russian propaganda machine needs to add a homophobic flavoring to its bullshit message, so that people couldn't smell its rotten, shitty essence. Because here in Russia, homophobia is such a strong part of everyday culture that when you add it to any story, no matter how absurd it is, you have people sold on it fast and easy. And for the majority of people here, homophobia is I bullshit you not. For the majority of people in this country, homophobia is part of their identity, especially for men. So in order to drive through this message about how bad and shitty European governments are, and how bad European people are, and how depraved and wicked European culture is, Russian government points at gay prides and gay marriages and other aspects of LGBT visibility in Europe. And let me tell you, that works like magic. Because when Russian people are so busy hating gay people and hating Europe as a result, they somehow stop thinking about poverty and corruption and embezzlement happening at an epic level in their own country, perpetrated by their own government. So, communists called this approach an opioid for the nation. You give people hatred against someone as a means to numb their pain and as a mental block to prevent them from critical thinking and from seeing where their pain and their trauma really comes from. So here's the answer. If it weren't for homophobia, a big part of Russian political propaganda would just lose its efficacy. So is it any surprising that homophobia is being actively reinforced in this country through the majority of government-controlled media? No. Is it any surprising that you can, hear lots of homophobic bullshit in church? Because church in this country works, as an aid to this political propaganda machine. Is it any surprising that you can turn on Russian television and then you can hear one of the most kind of revered, one of the most popular TV hosts saying that he thinks that when gay men die, their hearts should be cut off from their bodies and then burned. And then, the ashes should be separate, buried separately from their bodies. That gay men should also be prohibited from donating blood and semen. And then when this TV host says things like that, he gets loud applause from the audience. But before you tell me that this applause could be fake because this is the way television works, I can tell you that this person not only doesn't get laid off, not only doesn't he receive any condemnation, but he receives a promotion after saying things like that. So, now think about America. Now it makes me remember about how Roseanne Barr, put out that really racist tweet. And so she got fired immediately. Like, she doesn't even say that on camera. She just put out a drunken racist tweet. And then a multi-million, she gets just fired off a multi-million-dollar contract. And then in Russia you can see things like that. So homophobia here is fuel on which this propaganda machine runs. And also, the dehumanization of LGBT people, this is one of the two major mechanisms of homophobia worldwide. I talk about it in the second video, in the second episode in this series, like how homophobia works. Dehumanization is the kind of cultural phenomenon that Cover Over really benefits from. Because when you can, concentration camps, I talk, in some of my videos, I talk about concentration camps for gay men that exist in this country. That gay man, like in a certain region of this country, that happened two years ago, this information somehow broke into the news, but maybe those concentration camps had also existed before. So there are concentration camps built specifically for gay men. And so then there are special police officers who hunt for gay men on dating apps, who set up fake dates with those men, who then kidnap those men, bring them to those concentration camps, and there those gay men got tortured, mutilated, some of them get murdered. And of course, it's a state-sponsored violence. It's a state-covered violence, so it happens on taxpayers' money. My money included. I'm among the people who pay for the salaries of people who perpetrate those barbarities. I'm among the people who sponsor the building of those concentration camps. And this is what's happening today. And when international human rights organizations call attention to it and demand accountability, our authorities are like, oh, what? We never heard about that. And some people in this country say, who literally, govern that region of the country, they say, gay people, there are no gay people in this country. And if there were here, their own families would bury them. This is how our authorities talk about gay people, and they get away with that. And so that's the thing, when you kind of sustain a culture where you think about gay people as, kind of side effects of the evolution, as some, sick animals. And then, as a result, you get away with marginalizing and terrorizing this group of people because of their identity. And when you get away with perpetrating state-sponsored physical violence on that group of people, it is very, very important because it effectively communicates a message to the whole nation. Stay quiet, or the same thing will happen to you. So when you have something like homophobia in the culture, something that can be used to normalize flagrant violence, it's a very effective way to bully people into conformity and subservience, which power over absolutely needs to remain in existence. But enough about politics in Russia. Now let's talk about America and people who benefit from homophobia in America, so that we could have better global understanding of this social issue. So, for the first time in my life, I heard the name Donald Trump in 2014. And of course, you may tell me about how ignorant I am that I hadn't known such a famous person, but I actually hadn't known who Donald Trump was. Growing up in Russia, being born in Russia, I had never heard that name prior to that moment. And I basically came across this post on Facebook that was made by a Latino celebrity, very successful in the U.S. And so she posted the video of the speech that Donald Trump was giving. That was, another speech about Mexicans and illegal immigration. And so there were these words like drug traffickers, rapists, like this kind of building a wall rhetoric. And here's the thing, I'm not a Trump hater, not at all. But I talk a lot about Donald Trump and what he did and what he said, because I believe that Donald Trump represents, as a political leader, he represents a great historical example. And things in which he succeeded are just as deserving of a conversation and of analysis as those things that he miserably effed up as a president. And so I hadn't known who Donald Trump was prior to that moment in 2014, but then when I heard that speech, as a Hispanic, of course, I felt targeted and attacked on a personal level, because that was the rhetoric that addressed identity, that attacked identity. And of course I knew that there were xenophobes and white supremacists and nativists in America, but prior to that moment, I hadn't seen anyone with such a loud and eloquent voice who would kind of drive through this xenophobic, dehumanizing, racist rhetoric. And so that was, I just thought to myself, okay, so there are such people in the U.S., there are obviously people who listen to such figures as Donald Trump, who support them, but then I somehow forgot about it. And you know what, 1 year later, in 2015, when I heard that Donald Trump was going to run for the president of the U.S., you know what, I didn't take it seriously, because here's the thing. I also read somewhere how he talked about women, about gay people, about Muslim people, and so Like, when I heard that that person was going to run for the president of the U.S., I had to go and research about him, about his background, where he comes from, and then I learned that he is this big kind of reality TV star, this, kind of famous capitalist in the U.S. And so, when I read that, I thought, okay, so this is just a joke. So this guy just wants to attract attention to himself, he really enjoys being in the spotlight. So he's talking about, his kind of presidential campaign, this is a way for him to be in the center of the public's attention. But then, half a year after that, when I read that Donald Trump has actually become the Republican candidate for the election in the U.S., I was like, is the world going crazy? Are you kidding me? Is the world going to hell in a handbasket, as they say in Texas? What's going on? Is that serious? Is it real? Or maybe it's just a piece of fake news. But it was real, and of course, not in my wildest fantasy could I imagine that a person like Donald Trump could actually win an election in America. And here's the thing, it just reminded me about how much I lacked critical awareness of what was going on in America, and how little I knew about America as a culture, and how out of touch I was with the hearts and minds of millions of Americans. Because here's the thing, millions of Americans actually voted for Donald Trump. You may like it or not like it, but that is the truth. And so even though there is this information that Russia somehow invaded those elections and manipulated the results, but still, those results could not be as rigged as they are here in Russia, because here elections are rigged 100%. But actually millions of Americans supported Donald Trump and voted for him. And so there lies this great historical lesson about how did a person like that get such a result. That's why I think that Donald Trump's victory is a historical event, and I'm grateful that it happened. Not because I'm grateful for the consequences of his victory and all those policies that his administration enforced in the recent years, but because his victory just showed how powerful bullshit can be in our culture and how prevalent hate is in our culture. And all of that hadn't been so visible during Obama's presidency. So he just brought that to the surface. And Trump's victory just showed what unbelievable results you can get when you ride on the waves of people's fear and uncertainty and resentment, and when, just like in Russia, you as a leader gave your people someone to hate and blame. Because, let's be honest, what was Trump's story about? What was the essence of Trump's message? Make America great again. So let's just think for a moment about what does it mean, make America great again? It was about nostalgia. It was about nostalgia. It was about nostalgia for the good old times, for the good old America where everybody knew their place. For the times when women stayed at home and didn't become CEOs. For the times when black people were segregated, For the times when Hispanics could only be housekeepers at best. For the times when gay people in America couldn't marry and have kids. And so that story of nostalgia hits so much resonance among the hearts of millions of Americans, and homophobia was a big part of it. And you can see how this administration operationalized this story, since it's been in office, towards many people, towards immigrants, towards transgender people, towards the survivors of sexual assault. So the lesson is that power over these days cannot exist without bigotry. homophobia is just one of those pillars that support the last desperate stand of power over globally. And it turns out that it works the exact same way in America as it does here in Russia. As different as our countries might be. And finally, I want to talk, about gay people who benefit from homophobia. So that is the hardest part of this conversation. It gets rarely discussed, in an honest and meaningful way. And at first, it sounds like bullshit. Like, how can any gay people benefit from something that's targeted against them, against their identities? How can that happen? And so, in order to understand it, we need to understand two very important concepts, segregation and intersectionality. So, what is segregation? Segregation is basically physical separation of people into certain places, into certain environments, into certain social contexts, based on their identity. These days, as this concept has been well researched in social science, the first example where it was studied was racial segregation. Those times when black people in America, had special schools, they had special seats in buses and so on, like this physical separation of people based on their race. But now it has been so well researched in other dimensions of inequality. Like we can talk about gender segregation, about class segregation, about age segregation, about occupational segregation. And so here's the thing about segregation when we talk about the LGBT community. So there's no doubt that these days LGBT community, LGBT people have become far more visible in developed countries than they were, say, 50 years ago. They aren't visible in Russia or other third world countries. But when you go to Europe, when you go to America, when you go to other Western democracies that maybe not necessarily geographically Western like Australia, but still, you can see lots of people who are openly gay. And still, despite this increasing visibility of LGBT people, there is still a lot of segregation. So what does it mean? It means that LGBT people still have to gather in special places, in special kind of venues, in order to socialize, in order to meet each other, to build relationships. So there still are special places, kind of dedicated places for gay people, like gay bars, gay saunas, there are even some gay resorts. And so here's the thing. It happens because homophobia and heterosexism are still very powerful in society. So, just imagine for 1 second, if we had a society completely free from homophobia and heterosexism. And so in that society, if you were a guy and you were gay, and you could go to Starbucks, for example, where you would meet another guy that you like, and then in a society free from homophobia and heterosexism, you could approach that guy and kind of ask him out for a coffee or for a date, whatever, without the fear of being punched, harassed, sworn at, without the fear that showing your identity and showing your vulnerability can, cause some penalization. And so we don't have such society. If you're a gay guy and you like other guy in Starbucks, you will still fear to approach him and kind of start a conversation. So in order to be in a context where you don't fear that, you need to go to a gay bar or a gay hotel, or some place that is labeled gay, that probably has a rainbow flag at its door. And so that is exactly what segregation looks like. That gay people, because of the continuing homophobia and heterosexism, gay people have to remain segregated. And what that creates is it creates a whole range of businesses that benefit from segregation. So those people who kind of own gay bars, who run gay bars, who run, kind of those gay saunas or gay resorts, those people build basically their businesses on the remaining reality of segregation. Because if there weren't, like, if we didn't have homophobia, heterosexism, and if we didn't have segregation as a result, then there would be no such thing as gay bars or gay saunas or gay resorts. If we could actually arrive at the point of totally eradicating heterosexism and homophobia from our society, then gay people and LGBT people in general would be integrated into our society instead of remaining segregated and marginalized. So those businesses, they absolutely benefit from homophobia. And many of those businesses, but because they capitalize on segregation. And let me tell you, many of those businesses, I think, I don't have the exact numbers, but, from my experience of talking to gay people, in America and Canada and other countries, I can deduce that the majority of those businesses are owned by gay people. So this is, this is, some researchers call it pink capitalism. So those are gay people who make their money from segregation, and so they benefit from continuing homophobia as a result. And another thing that comes to my mind that basically I discovered just a couple years ago when I had this really interesting communication with a gay man from Canada who's really, really vulnerable and really sincere, talking to me, as a researcher about his experiences. That was really, really interesting. I learned a lot about gay culture that, I hadn't known before. And so he talked to me about gay porn and about, because at some point in his life he worked in that industry. And so he told me this really important concept. You know what? Is that, like, if we have a society that is free from heterosexism and homophobia, that allows gay people to get access to the societal infrastructure where they can meet each other and form lasting relationships, meaningful relationships. Like, if we lived in a society that would have total equality, that would give LGBT people access to institutions like marriage or parenthood, then gay people could actually meet each other just like straight people are meeting each other. Okay? So then they wouldn't, like, their life wouldn't be limited to those shallow relationships that are initiated in gay bars or, on hookup websites. And also, here's what it has to do with porn. I do believe that porn is a form of film prostitution. And gay prostitution, really looks like a burgeoning industry these days, especially in the light of continued LGBT liberation. There's actually a lot of capital that's held in the hands of gay people in the West. And here's the thing. When we have a society that is full of homophobia, heterosexism, then gay people in that society remain silenced and closeted. So instead of going out and meeting one another and building meaningful, functional, lasting relationships with one another, those exact relationships that they deserve to have, just as the majority of the culture has those relationships. Instead of that, gay people stay at home, watch porn, and masturbate. Like, I know that may sound offensive to someone, but that's what I learned from that man in Canada. He really opened my eyes to that. Because if you cannot get access to real love, to real connection, then the only thing that is left for you is just kind of discharge your sexuality by doing that thing and watching porn. And so that's why there's high demand on the market of gay porn industry, because this industry again benefits from segregation. It again benefits from the fact that gay people cannot get access to normal societal infrastructure where they can build functional, lasting, emotionally, kind of emotionally profound relationships. And so basically, when just with these two examples, gay bars, gay saunas, and the porn industry, you can see how homophobia creates demand on those markets and creates cash flow to those markets, even though those industries are basically gay-owned. So those are people who run those businesses, who own those businesses, are gay people who basically benefit from homophobia, as counterintuitive as this may sound. And so talking about rich gay people in the West brings me to the next very important concept that's crucial to understand why some gay people actually benefit from homophobia, and that is intersectionality. So here's the thing, it's quite simple. What intersectionality means? It means that there are many dimensions of inequality, like class, race, sexual orientation, gender, immigration status, to many, many dimensions in which inequality exists. And it may turn out that you have disadvantage in one dimension. For example, you're gay, you have the disadvantage in the dimension of sexual orientation, but at the same time, you have unearned advantage in other dimensions. For example, class or access to economic opportunity or place of residence. Those things are quite often related. And so it turns out that your unearned advantage in those dimensions where you have them, and unearned advantages are called privilege, can effectively neutralize the impact of your disadvantage in other dimensions. So they may make you exempt from being targeted with oppression in those dimensions where you are disadvantaged. So, for example, with homophobia, you may be gay, but your status, your money, your place of residence, that may be all results of randomness, results of random circumstances, may well make you exempt from being targeted with homophobia in the way that the majority of your community around the world is targeted. And so those rich gay men in Western countries, it turns out that they occupy, because of their money, because of their status, they occupy privileged positions within the overall oppressed community. And I actually didn't understand that before starting to do networking around my book, which, aside from homophobia, heterosexism addresses mental health stigma, corruption, immigration, medical malpractice, also other globally relevant social topics. But when I started networking efforts with that book, I thought that I should reach out to gay people in the first place. Those gay people who worked in the creative industry in the US or other Western countries, I thought that they would be among the first to understand the value of my work and to want to help me. Because, I still stuck to that notion that empathy is a function of shared trauma. So if they're gay, if they went through the trauma of homophobia, then they should understand how important it is to fight it and how important it is to help LGBT activists like myself. And so here's the thing. When I started I wrote the book with the assumption that came, from my research, that came from my data, with the assumption that gay people are oppressed. And when I talk about oppression, I include economic oppression as well. Because, any conversation about social justice or privilege or oppression that doesn't include economic status or class is bullshit. So oppression, when you talk about racial oppression or gender oppression or homophobia, any kind of oppression, it basically has very visible and tangible economic repercussions, for the lives of those individuals. And I started doing that networking on Instagram. And let me tell you, Instagram, like, I didn't know that the picture of the world that Instagram shows you is so distorted. So distorted. So first of all, if you go on Instagram, you may very quickly get an impression that almost one half or even more than one half of all men are gay. Like, that is the first obvious distortion that you get. There's like lots of LGBT visibility out there on Instagram, and it looks like it's like a must for any gay man to, start an Instagram page and post photos of his naked or semi-naked body on this page. And I know it may sound quite stereotypical, but over 5 years that I've been on Instagram, well, unfortunately, that's the reality for the majority of gay folks, of gay men particularly. And here's the thing, when I started looking for gay people to reach out to, and all those were Western gay people, I couldn't see any gay people who were oppressed in the economic sense of the word. Like, I didn't see any gay men who lost their jobs because they were gay, or who couldn't get access to education or healthcare because they were gay. No, I saw people with lots of money, people driving nice cars, people going to luxury resorts, people who dated other well-groomed, well-buffed, well-clad men like themselves. People who had access to things like fertility care and having kids. And so, only later did I understand that it was their money and their economic status that drastically decreased their proximity to the trauma that was being inflicted on the majority of their community. And so, I was talking to them about the urgency of fighting homophobia and about the impact of homophobia, because they had the power to help me with my project. They had connections in the creative industry in the US that were required in order to get a work like mine out there in an effective and meaningful way. As someone trapped in a third world country with no penny behind my back, I couldn't do anything with my work as valuable as it was, as innovative as it was. No matter the amount of my talent, it was just not possible. And self-publishing wasn't an option for a work like mine either. It's obviously a separate story. But here's the thing. It turned out that those gay people who portrayed themselves as LGBT activists and like social equality champions in the public eye on their pages, in fact, when the conversation got real, when the conversation got off camera, it turned out that they were not in the least interested to how fight homophobia in a real and meaningful way. So their LGBT activism, first, it wasn't intersectional, it was only limited to this dimension of homophobia, heterosexism, where their own kind of discrimination lay. That was one major difference between me as an LGBT activist and them as gay people. And second, all their activism was just limited to kind of wrapping themselves in rainbow flags and posting the pictures of that on Instagram. Just I will wrap my well-buffed body, that I pump out like somewhere in a gym in Miami or West Hollywood. I will kind of wrap it in a rainbow flag and then take a picture of my torso, of my muscle torso wrapped in that flag. And that's it. Like, that was all that their activism was about. They weren't willing to have real, tough, honest conversations, including conversations, across empathic barriers, like conversations with straight people, that my work exactly leads, because I wrote that book from a straight person's perspective. And so, also, I think my work and kind of the backstory behind that work pissed them off a lot, because I'm not promoting just LGBT advocacy. I'm promoting intersectional social justice. So I'm standing for equality and justice for everyone, not just gay people. And there is a very strong message around that in the book. And my stand for intersectional social justice and my willingness to talk about things like privilege obviously pissed them off because it reminded them of their privilege, of their economic privilege, especially when, in order, to illustrate this concept, I talked about my socioeconomic disadvantage here in Russia, in a third world country that exists despite my university education, despite 10 years of working, despite, any effort that I put, so their privilege of living in America and having access to economic opportunity clearly pissed them off. And so they just dismissed my work, dismissed my story, dismissed the importance of what I was doing. And I think the biggest example of that was this relationship with a talent agent that I had last year, who was originally from Venezuela, but he lived in the U.S. at the age of 12. He moved to the U.S., at the expense of his family. That was privilege. Unlike modern-day Venezuelans who have to just flee the country that's fallen apart and who have to find jobs and accommodations, themselves create those opportunities. No, but he moved, quite fortunately, because his grandparents already lived in Miami. And so his life in the U.S. turned out to be pretty fortunate. He went to college in Florida, then he moved to the U.S. where he started representing fashion photographers, and then he just scaled up that business and moved to Los Angeles where he started representing talent in Hollywood. And so, again, he was a gay man, and I again bought into this kind of erroneous beliefs that as a gay man, he will be very likely to help me. Because here's the thing, as a talent agent, he had lots of connections in the creative industry in the US, including the connections directly with those people that I needed to be connected with and that I couldn't connect with because of their status, because of their kind of celebrity status. I didn't have access to those people, and I couldn't get access to those people. And he did have that access. That was his privilege. And so, we kind of had this communication first around his podcast that was kind of portrayed as a podcast dedicated to spirituality and innovation and creativity. But then at a certain point, he started sharing really personal things with me and started treating me as a friend and calling me a friend and telling me all the things about how he appreciated my capacity for empathy and my presence in his life. Those things that were really personal. And I was like, okay, let's build this friendship, this long distance friendship, over 11 time zones. And so it took me a year to basically make this decision to open up to him and to tell him about my work and the fact that I need help with my work. So he had the ability to help me with my work, and that ability was created, importantly, by his privilege. Not by anything that he's earned, but by his privilege, by the fact that circumstances turned out in his life in such a way that he had access to those people who I needed to be connected with. And so he's a gay man, and I think, okay, my work addresses those many globally relevant social issues, but as he's a gay man, I need to talk to him about homophobia in the first place. And so I basically shared with him the data that I collected during years of my research about the impact of homophobia, and this is the data that informed the urgency of fighting homophobia. So I told him about what gay people go through here in Russia, and particularly about concentration camps that, this information broke into the news some 2 years ago, that there are concentration camps in a special region in a certain region of this country where there are special police officers who hunt for gay men or dating apps, and then they set up fake dates with those men. Then they just hunt for those men, kidnap those men, bring them to the concentration camps where those men get tortured, mutilated, some of them get murdered. And so that is a state-sponsored homophobic violence because of course, those concentration camps are built from taxpayers' money, from the federal budget. And those police officers receive their salaries from taxpayers' money. Like, this is because the kind of government we have in this country. And that probably doesn't surprise you a lot, given what I mentioned earlier in this conversation, how a TV host can say that, when gay men die, like their hearts must be cut off from their bodies and burned, and he gets away with that. So this is like, homophobia is one of parts of our political doctrine, and so people who perpetrate that, of course, they get away with what they're doing. And so, I tell him about that, and he says, well, I think that if we're spiritual enough, we need to accept everybody's beliefs and their behaviors, even if their beliefs are hateful towards us as LGBT people. And so, I was just so stumped. I was just super, what's going on? This man sitting, he sits in Hollywood. He sits, on a couch in a chic living room in West Hollywood. He's the one who is dating other gay celebrities. He's the one, who gets tens of thousands of dollars every month from his work. He goes to luxury resorts everywhere. And he says, he tells an LGBT activist like me that, my work serves no purpose. That we should just accept state-sponsored homophobic violence. Well, and that is a very convenient position, because this violence doesn't affect him, because he's not among the ones who gets targeted because of his place of residence, because of his money. He's not the one whose house gets set on fire when someone in his neighborhood sees him with his same-sex partner or with the guy that he goes on dates with. He's not the one who gets laid off when someone discovers that he's gay. He's not the one who gets pulled over, harassed. And so it's so convenient for him to say that, well, we should accept homophobic violence. We should accept the beliefs of those police officers who perpetrate these barbarities and the concentration camps in Russia, because he's not in Russia, because his individual ass is safe. So how cute is that? But I was just so shocked and so stupefied by this response that instead of just believing that person as he showed his true colors to me, I went on with this conversation. I thought, my empathy skills kicked in, and I thought, but maybe this is not a great example because he's gay, and maybe he just imagined himself in the shoes of those men who got mutilated and tortured here in Russia. And so maybe that was just so triggering to him. So I shared with him another example that is kind of milder, but still shows the urgency of fighting homophobia. I shared with him the data about homeless kids in the streets of major American cities. Almost one half of homeless teenagers in the streets of major American cities are LGBTQ. So those are the kids who got kicked out of their homes by their own families when those families found out that they were gay or trans. And this is not some third world country a million years ago. This is what America looks like today. And so what does homelessness mean at that age? Homelessness is trauma, no doubt, but what does this trauma specifically mean at that age? Exclusion from education, possibly exclusion from workforce, exposure to human trafficking, exposure to drugs, prostitution. And then, guess what he responds to that? He says, well, I believe that God sends these kids that experience for their spiritual enlightenment. So it was like, who do you think you are, Jorge, to want to change anything for those kids? God sends it to them for spiritual enlightenment. Who do you think you are to get in God's way? And that's a very convenient position for someone who wasn't kicked out of his home when his parents discovered or his grandparents discovered that he was gay. It is a very convenient position for someone who lives in a nice house in West Hollywood and doesn't pick up food from garbage trucks like his fellow Venezuelans do in his native country these days. For someone who rubs shoulders with other celebrities, who goes on vacations to luxurious resorts, and for someone who dates other well-buffed, well-fed, well-clad, well-groomed gay men like himself. It's a very convenient position to rationalize the trauma that the majority of his community goes through on a daily basis around the world, and to, as a consequence, to rationalize his unwillingness to contribute to changing it, and to help activists like me, because his individual ass is safe. And so, before you tell me that he's just, a privileged, hypocritical asshole, I can tell you that, unfortunately, over 5 years, I talked, with more than 100 people about my project. And the majority of them were upper middle class gay men from America. And so they responded exactly like that. Because their individual assets were safe from the horrors of homophobia, because of their money, because of their place of residence. They weren't interested to help anyone fight it. And importantly, those were situations of power over, another example here. Because in these situations, in the work around my book and the creative project with my book, I couldn't affect change. I was an artist trapped in poverty in a third world country. I couldn't affect any change. I couldn't effectively get that work out so it could serve the LGBT community or other people that it was destined to serve. I couldn't affect change no matter how much value my book had, artistic value or social value. But they had connections, publicity. They had access to publicity, to resources, to, powerful people. And so they could help me. They could affect change in the situation around my book, not because they were stronger or better than me, but because of their privilege, because of random circumstances. And so when you bump into that same pattern over many years, that obviously points to some cultural issue that those gay people who have intersectional privilege in other areas of life, different from sexuality, in areas of life like class, economic opportunity, place of residence, and who, as a result of that operate from the position of power over in life, they aren't actually interested to find homophobia because they actually benefit from it. Because homophobia, as the external threat to the entire community, secures their privileged position in it. It secures the fact that they're among the select few in that community who are safe from violence, who can openly love and be loved, who can date people like themselves, who have access to healthcare, who can marry and have kids, who have access to economic opportunity, who aren't being harassed, laid off, pulled over, targeted when they come out. And so if there were no homophobia, they wouldn't have this privilege today. And so once they realize that, they want to keep it. They want to make sure that things in the world stay exactly as they are. That's why they choose to keep their comfort, to keep having fun, to keep leveraging the shit out of their privilege, and to never get involved with real conversations and real activism around social justice, and to never use their privilege, their power, their connections, and their influence to help activists like me. Even though that choice comes at the cost of leaving the majority of their community in continuing trauma. And so, in order to fight homophobia and heterosexism effectively, we have to call out these gay people just as much as we have to call out straight people who benefit from homophobia and heterosexism. And importantly, is the job, the collective job of both straight people and gay people to have these meaningful, honest, real, and very uncomfortable conversations and spread critical awareness about homophobia and heterosexism. So I'm doing this work as an artist through my creative gifts, through my creative storytelling, And I know that everybody can do it too. There are many ways to contribute to change around social justice. No matter your profession, no matter your class, no matter your own orientation, no matter where you live, you can still have real conversations with people from the position of critical awareness rather than judgment, arrogance, or self-righteousness. Because critical awareness is the only approach that brings about meaningful, lasting change in people's minds and their beliefs. You don't fight homophobia by saying, I'm successful, I'm rich, and I'm gay. Look at my luxury life on Instagram. Look at my cars. Look at my well-buffed body. Look at the places where I go to on vacation. That doesn't work. That only reinforces LGBT stereotypes. You don't fight homophobia by saying, you know what, just like smoking, homophobia is no longer in the trend. So these days, it's more fashionable to be LGBT accepting. So let's be LGBT accepting. Don't be a homophobe. BS. You don't fight homophobia either by, laying into a homophobe with an angry face and calling them names and shaming them. But you do fight homophobia by communicating to people where it comes from, how it works, what impact it has, and who benefits from it. You fight it by giving people context and understanding of their beliefs first, and then staying civil as you speak truth to their bullshit. So we need to grow our skills of courage and vulnerability in order to speak truth to bullshit around homophobia. It's one of our worst historical stories. And it's only after we own this story in its entirety that we'll be able to write a different ending to it. So thank y'all for watching this series. Thank y'all for watching this particular video. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I know that time is one of our most coveted and unrenewable resources. So I do hope that you got new information to reflect upon from these videos. And I would love to have a discussion with y'all in the comments below, so please do leave me a comment. And as always, if you find this video insightful, inspiring, or helpful, please don't hesitate to share it with your friends. And also don't forget to subscribe. I will see you next time on Her Heroes YouTube channel. Keep telling the truth. Show up. Stay curious. Be brave. And take care, guys. Bye.